What if one of the greatest displays of power wasn't about convincing, responding, or winning an argument, but simply ignoring? This sounds strange because most people have been taught to believe the exact opposite. From an early age, they learn that they need to justify themselves, explain their choices, respond to criticism, and constantly prove their own worth. But there's an uncomfortable truth that few dare to admit. The more you try to convince certain people, the more power you give them. Machiavelli observed something that remains as true today as it was centuries ago. Most conflicts don't happen because of a lack of arguments. They happen because people compete for attention. And whoever controls your attention controls your life. The problem is that most people give away this precious resource for free. A negative comment ruins the whole day. A criticism occupies hours of thought. A provocation receives more energy than dreams themselves. But here's the counterintuitive part. Not every battle should be won. Some should be abandoned. Not every person deserves an answer. Some deserve only silence. And not every opinion deserves space in your mind. Throughout this video, you'll discover why ignoring certain people isn't a sign of weakness, arrogance, or cowardice. In fact, it can be one of the smartest strategies for protecting your peace, strengthening your influence, and regaining control of your emotional energy. You'll understand why some people become emotionally untouchable, while others spend their entire lives being controlled by criticism, rejection, and the constant need for approval. And when you understand the hidden mechanism behind human attention, you may never look at your relationships the same way again. If something inside you awakened while listening, don't ignore that feeling. This channel isn't about videos, it's about memories. Remember who you were before the fear, before the exhaustion, before the silence. Each new video here is a different reflection of your own soul, an invitation to understand what the world never taught you. The power you seek outside has always been within you. If you feel that this journey speaks to what lives silently within you, sign up now. Not to follow yet another creator, but to reconnect with something the world tried to make you forget. Because here, every word was made to heal, each reflection to awaken, and each video serves as a reminder. You are not alone on the path back to yourself. Click on subscribe and turn the algorithm into a daily reminder of who you really are. There is a silent rule that governs virtually all human relationships, although few people consciously realize it. The more access someone has to another person's emotions, the greater the influence they can exert over them. This is precisely why so many individuals live emotionally exhausted without understanding the true cause. They believe they are simply being kind, approachable, or understanding, when in reality, they are freely giving away something extremely valuable. Machiavelli deeply understood this mechanism because he observed human nature without illusions. His vision was based on a politics guided by reality, not ideals, and this reality shows that emotions are gateways. Whenever someone manages to determine your mood, control your attention, or influence your reactions, that person gains a portion of your power. Just observe someone who receives a message and immediately abandons everything to respond, or someone whose entire day is ruined by a criticism from a single person. The problem is not the criticism or the message. The problem lies in the unrestricted access granted. Whoever allows anyone to freely enter their emotional territory ends up living like a castle without walls. And unprotected castles rarely stand for long. The most curious thing is that this invasion often happens so gradually that the victim believes they are simply being a good person. Imagine someone who spends hours trying to convince others of their worth. They post something, check reactions every few minutes, and feel anxious when they don't receive immediate recognition. Without realizing it, their emotional stability becomes dependent on external responses. At that moment, the center of control ceases to be within them and passes into the hands of others. Machiavelli knew that the end justifies the means when the goal is to preserve one's own position, and this includes protecting one's own mind. This isn't about coldness or arrogance. It's about understanding that emotional access is an extremely expensive currency. Those who distribute it indiscriminately usually pay a high price later. The strongest individuals rarely reveal all their emotions because they understand the strategic value of reserve. They practice a kind of appearance of virtue, maintaining cordiality and balance while carefully choosing who will truly have access to their vulnerabilities. There is a huge difference between being open and being available to anyone. One attitude generates connection, the other generates dependence. And when this dependency sets in, something even more dangerous begins to happen because the human being starts to constantly seek something that seems harmless, but which silently erodes their personal authority. From the moment someone surrenders control of their own emotions to others, an almost invisible, yet extremely dangerous need arises: the need for approval. This is where many people fall into a trap from which they spend years trying to escape. They believe they are seeking recognition, but in practice, they are outsourcing their own worth. Every compliment becomes fuel. Every criticism becomes a threat. Every sign of approval generates temporary relief, and every sign of rejection generates insecurity. The problem is that no one can build true emotional strength when they constantly depend on the opinions of others to feel worthy. Machiavelli observed that people often act driven by interests, perceptions, and convenience. Therefore, his decisions based on real human nature led him to understand that those who seek approval become predictable, and those who are predictable can be controlled. Just observe the work environment. The employee who constantly tries to please everyone usually ends up receiving more demands, more pressure, and less respect. Not because they are incompetent, but because they convey the message that they desperately need the acceptance of others to feel valued. The dynamic is similar in friendships, relationships, and even on social media. The more someone demonstrates a need for validation, the less influence they exert. It seems contradictory, but that's exactly how it works. Confident people don't chase approval because they already have internal criteria to evaluate their own actions. They listen to opinions, learn from criticism, and consider advice. But they don't turn this into emotional dependence. Machiavelli taught that it's better to be feared than loved when both options are not possible, because excessively sought love is often accompanied by submission. Those who desperately need to be loved end up accepting disrespect, neglecting boundaries, and abandoning their own identity to please others. In contrast, those who build self-validation develop a different presence. They don't need to convince anyone all the time. They don't need to explain every decision. They don't need to prove their worth at every moment. Their confidence comes from results, principles, and accumulated experiences. It's like an experienced investor who doesn't panic in the face of a momentary market fluctuation because they know exactly what they have. But there's an even more powerful detail that separates the truly strong from those who only appear strong. This detail isn't about speaking louder, arguing better, or winning debates. It begins precisely when someone learns the value of saying absolutely nothing. There is a huge difference between remaining silent out of fear and remaining silent by choice. Most people never learn this distinction. When provoked, they feel the need to respond. When criticized, they feel the need to defend themselves. When misunderstood, they feel the need to explain every detail. It's as if they believe their peace depends on convincing everyone around them. But life teaches a hard lesson. Not every battle is worth fighting. Machiavelli understood that power lies not only in visible actions, but also in what one chooses not to do. Often, the strongest response is precisely the absence of it. Those who master strategic silence understand that not every accusation requires a defense, not every provocation requires a reaction, and not every opinion deserves attention. In a politics guided by reality, not ideals, silence functions as a tool for observation. While most speak impulsively, revealing intentions, insecurities, and weaknesses, those who remain serene gather information. It's similar to an experienced chess player observing several moves ahead, while others are focused only on the next piece. Silence doesn't just create mystery, it creates advantage. Just consider a common situation. Imagine someone receiving an aggressive message or unfair criticism. The immediate impulse is to respond, explain, justify, or counterattack. However, by acting this way, that person enters exactly the game the other wants. The provocateur gets what they were looking for: your attention. And attention is a form of energy. Machiavelli knew that the calculated use of force doesn't mean always attacking. Often it means conserving resources until the moment is favorable. The same principle applies to emotions. Every useless argument consumes time. Every excessive justification consumes authority. Every impulsive reaction delivers valuable information to the observer. Truly influential people understand this intuitively. They don't rush to clarify every misunderstanding. They don't live trying to correct every rumor. They don't turn every comment into a debate. Instead, they carefully choose where to invest their energy. There's even a curious effect. The less someone feels the need to explain themselves, the more others observe them with respect. Well-used silence generates a presence that is difficult to ignore, but there is something even deeper happening behind the scenes of this process. Because when someone chooses silence, it inevitably forces the other person to face one of the most uncomfortable psychological experiences that exist: the feeling of being ignored. Few experiences are as uncomfortable for a human being as the feeling of being ignored. Interestingly, this doesn't happen solely out of pride or vanity. There's something much deeper involved. For thousands of years, human survival depended on acceptance from the group. Being excluded from a tribe meant facing dangers alone. Therefore, the human brain developed mechanisms extremely sensitive to signs of rejection. When someone is ignored, a primitive part of the mind interprets this situation as a real threat. This is why so many people become restless when they don't receive a reply to a message, when they are excluded from a conversation, or when they realize their presence no longer has an impact. Machiavelli closely observed these reactions because he understood that human behavior is rarely guided by pure logic. Emotions play a much larger role than most people imagine. Those who understand this begin to see relationships differently. Not because they want to manipulate others, but because they understand that the need for attention drives a large part of human decisions. And those who control their own need for attention achieve a freedom that few manage to attain. It's interesting to note that many people spend their entire lives chasing recognition without realizing they are reacting precisely to the fear of exclusion. When someone fails to respond immediately, anxiety arises. When they don't receive enough likes, insecurity arises. When they aren't invited to a certain place, a feeling of loss emerges. All of this reveals how much external approval still influences their emotional stability. Machiavelli understood that virtù and fortuna go hand in hand. But true virtù is born when an individual learns to govern themselves before trying to influence anyone else. Strength doesn't lie in deliberately causing rejection. Strength lies in not being controlled by the fear of it. Think about how many misguided decisions arise simply because someone can't bear the possibility of being ignored. People accept bad relationships, remain in worn-out friendships, and tolerate disrespect just to avoid the discomfort of exclusion. It is precisely at this point that many surrender their power without realizing it. Because those who fear being ignored become vulnerable to emotional manipulation. However, there is an even rarer skill than enduring rejection. It's the ability to consciously step away when necessary, even knowing that others might not understand your decision. And that's where one of the most powerful strategies for preserving energy, authority, and inner peace begins. Most people associate strength with the ability to keep fighting. They believe that winning means resisting at all costs, persisting until the last moment, and never retreating. But this view often produces more wear and tear than results. The greatest strategists in history understood something that human pride has difficulty accepting. Retreating is not always a sign of weakness. Often, it is precisely the highest demonstration of intelligence. Machiavelli observed that effective leaders did not waste resources on worthless battles. They understood that energy, time, reputation, and attention are limited assets. In a politics guided by reality, not by ideals, the goal is not to win every dispute. The goal is to preserve enough strength to win those that truly matter. How many people remain arguing with individuals who will never change their minds? How many continue trying to save clearly worn-out relationships? How many persist in environments that drain their peace simply because they don't want to admit that it's time to leave? Strategic retreat arises when someone understands that persisting is not always courage. In many cases, persisting is merely attachment disguised as determination, and excessive attachment is usually a terrible advisor. Think of an experienced investor. When they realize an asset has lost its fundamentals, they don't remain stuck in the position just to prove they were right. They accept reality, adjust their strategy, and redirect their resources to better opportunities. The same principle applies to life. There are friendships that become constant sources of drama. There are professional environments that reward mediocrity and punish excellence. There are discussions that produce no growth, only emotional wear and tear. Machiavelli understood that the calculated use of force includes knowing exactly when not to use it. After all, a general who puts his entire army into every conflict will soon find himself without the resources to defend what really matters. Similarly, those who invest emotions in every situation end up emotionally bankrupt. The strongest individuals are not afraid to walk away when necessary. They understand that avoiding being hated doesn't mean remaining available for abuse or disrespect. It means acting intelligently without turning every exit into a spectacle. Often, the most powerful retreat happens silently, without dramatic announcements, without endless explanations, and without the need for approval. But when someone learns to strategically distance themselves, they inevitably begin to realize something even more valuable. Their emotional energy comes to be seen as territory that cannot be accessed by just anyone. After a person learns to withdraw from pointless battles, they begin to see something that previously went unnoticed. Not everyone deserves unrestricted access to their emotional energy. This realization completely changes how they relate to the world. For a long time, many believed that always being available is a demonstration of kindness, maturity, or generosity. However, reality is often more complex. When someone is available to everyone all the time, they end up becoming scarce for themselves. Their thoughts are constantly interrupted, their goals take a back seat, their peace depends on external demands. Machiavelli understood that every power structure needs boundaries. No kingdom remains strong if anyone can freely enter and leave its gates. The same applies to the human mind. True emotional strength does not arise from unrestricted openness, but from the ability to consciously choose who will have access to the most valuable space in one's own life. In a politics guided by reality, not ideals, protecting this territory is not selfishness. It is strategic survival. Those who do not set limits inevitably become hostages to the expectations of others. There's a huge difference between being kind and being emotionally accessible to everyone. The most balanced individuals understand this. They help when needed, listen when it makes sense, and demonstrate empathy without turning their own lives into a permanent emotional emergency room. Machiavelli observed that the most effective leaders preserved their authority precisely because they didn't distribute their attention indiscriminately. Their presence had value because it was selective. Something similar happens in human relationships. The rarer and more conscious the access to your emotional energy, the more valuable it becomes. This doesn't mean coldness, arrogance, or isolation. It means understanding that attention is a finite resource. Think of someone who interrupts their work 10 times a day to solve problems that aren't even theirs, or someone who spends hours absorbing complaints, dramas, and conflicts from people who show no intention of changing. Little by little, their energy disappears, their clarity diminishes, their productivity drops. That's why constant adaptability requires recognizing when to open doors and when to keep them closed. After all, a territory without limits ceases to be territory. And when someone finally learns to protect that inner space, an inevitable question arises: how to identify exactly who deserves access and who deserves only silent distance. One of the most valuable skills one can develop is learning to distinguish who deserves their attention from who deserves only their silence. The problem is that many people lump everyone together. They treat constructive criticism and destructive attacks the same way. They react to malicious comments with the same intensity as they would to sincere advice, and that's exactly where they waste an enormous amount of energy. Machiavelli understood that human relationships are composed of different interests, perceptions, and intentions. Therefore, his decisions based on real human nature took into account not only what someone said, but also why they said it. Not every critic is an enemy, and not every compliment is a demonstration of loyalty. There are people who point out errors because they desire growth. Others point out errors because they desire control. There are individuals who offer advice because they see potential. Others do so only to diminish the confidence of others. Those who don't learn to identify this difference end up living in a constant state of reaction. And a life based on reaction rarely produces freedom. It only transfers control into the hands of others. Beyond outspoken critics and adversaries, there is an even more dangerous group, the so-called energy vampires. These are people who always seem surrounded by problems, conflicts, and crises. Talking to them for even a few minutes causes emotional exhaustion. They rarely seek solutions. Most of the time, they seek an audience. They need someone to absorb their frustrations, to continue feeding their own cycle of negativity. Machiavelli understood that one's own loyal armies are more reliable than borrowed forces. In the emotional realm, this means surrounding oneself with people who strengthen one's clarity instead of weakening it. It's not about abandoning those facing legitimate difficulties. It's about recognizing patterns. If someone spends years complaining about the same problems without showing any intention of change, perhaps they are not seeking help. Perhaps they are just seeking an audience. The wisest individuals observe behaviors before investing trust. They analyze consistency, character, and reciprocity. Over time, they realize that silence can be an extremely effective response to certain types of people, not because they want to punish them, but because they understand that attention is an investment, and smart investors don't put resources into assets that only produce losses. However, to apply this strategy without guilt or suffering, it is necessary to develop an even rarer ability: the discipline to remain emotionally stable even when everything around tries to provoke a reaction. When people hear the word indifference, many imagine someone cold, distant, or incapable of feeling emotions, but this interpretation is far from the truth. True strategic indifference does not mean the absence of feelings, it means freedom from them. It is the ability to not allow momentary emotions to take control of important decisions. Ancient philosophers called this apatheia, a state of inner equilibrium in which the individual continues to feel but does not become a slave to what they feel. Machiavelli deeply understood this dynamic because he knew that the greatest human errors rarely stem from reason. They arise from impulsiveness. They arise from anger that demands immediate revenge. They arise from pride that cannot accept being contradicted. They arise from fear that transforms small threats into great catastrophes. In a politics guided by reality, not by ideals, the truly strong person is not the one who never feels intense emotions. It is the one who manages to prevent these emotions from guiding their life. They observe anger without obeying it. They observe fear without surrendering to it. They observe anxiety without allowing it to determine their actions. This skill seems simple in theory, but it completely changes how someone navigates life's challenges. Imagine a common situation. Someone receives unfair criticism in front of others. The automatic reaction would be to respond immediately, raise their voice, or try to prove their worth. But those who have developed this discipline understand that not every emotion deserves immediate action. Often, the greatest sign of strength is precisely the absence of impulsive reaction. Machiavelli taught that it is better to be feared than loved when circumstances demand firmness, but he also understood that true power is born from self-control. After all, those who can control their own emotions become much more difficult to manipulate. Impulsive people reveal their weaknesses quickly. Disciplined people remain unpredictable. This is why emotionally balanced individuals often convey such a striking presence. They don't chase after every conflict. They don't despair at every obstacle. They don't transform every setback into an existential crisis. There is a serenity in their movements that sets them apart from most. And this serenity doesn't arise by chance. It is built through practice, observation, and constant adaptability. Over time, this attitude produces a curious effect. While others remain trapped in the emotions of the moment, these people begin to see invisible patterns that govern human relationships. And it is precisely there that one of the oldest and most sophisticated games of social interaction is revealed. Most people go through life believing that human relationships happen spontaneously, almost randomly. They observe friendships, rivalries, alliances, and conflicts without realizing that behind it all, there are predictable patterns. It's not about conspiracy or constant manipulation. It's simply human nature operating in the same way it always has. Machiavelli dedicated a large part of his observations to understanding precisely these invisible movements. He understood that all human interaction involves influence, perception, and positioning. In a politics guided by reality, not by ideals, it is not enough to analyze what people say. It is necessary to observe what they value, what they fear, what they desire, and what they try to hide. Those who learn to see these dynamics begin to realize that social life functions much more like a game of chess than a game of chance. Every attitude communicates something. Every reaction reveals information. Every silence produces interpretations. While most react automatically to events, attentive observers begin to identify movements even before they happen. And this ability creates a silent advantage that is rarely perceived by others. Consider a professional environment. There are people who talk all the time to demonstrate their importance. Others observe, listen, and carefully choose when to speak. Often, It is the latter who accumulate more influence over time. This happens because they understand a fundamental principle of social chess. Not every piece needs to move on every turn. Machiavelli knew that the calculated use of force includes economy of movement. The more predictable someone becomes, the easier it is to anticipate their actions. On the other hand, those who act strategically preserve their ability to surprise. This principle also appears in friendships, relationships, and negotiations. Often, the person who seems to be losing an argument is simply refusing a pointless battle. Often, those who seem distant are simply protecting emotional resources for greater goals. This is why truly strong individuals rarely engage in ego-driven disputes. They understand that genuine status doesn't need to be defended every 5 minutes. Their attention remains focused on more important goals. Like in a game of chess, they analyze not only the current move, but also its future consequences. And the more someone develops this strategic vision, the more they begin to perceive a danger that affects millions of people daily without them even noticing. The tendency to allow the opinions of others to determine the course of their own lives. Few prisons are as effective as the one built on the need for approval. The most curious thing is that most people live within it without even realizing it. They choose what to wear, thinking about the judgment of others. They choose what to say, imagining how they will be perceived. They postpone dreams, hide opinions, and abandon opportunities just to avoid criticism. Little by little, their lives cease to be guided by their own values and begin to be driven by the expectations of others. Machiavelli observed that much of human behavior is influenced by the search for social acceptance. However, his decisions based on real human nature led him to realize something uncomfortable. Trying to please everyone is an impossible mission. There will always be those who criticize. There will always be those who misinterpret your intentions. There will always be those who disapprove of your choices. The issue is not eliminating these opinions. The issue is preventing them from controlling your direction. In a politics guided by reality, not by ideals, the mature individual understands that respect and approval are different things. Respect can be earned through competence, character, and consistency. Universal approval, on the other hand, simply does not exist. And pursuing something impossible usually only generates anxiety, frustration, and loss of identity. Imagine someone who wants to start a business, change careers, or pursue an ambitious goal. Before even acting, they begin to imagine criticism. They think about what family members will say. They think about the opinions of friends. They think about negative comments that may never happen, and so they remain paralyzed. The curious thing is that many of life's greatest regrets don't stem from mistakes made. They stem from decisions never made for fear of disapproval. Machiavelli understood that virtù and fortuna favor those who act despite uncertainties. This doesn't mean ignoring intelligent advice. It means learning to differentiate valuable guidance from emotional noise. Extraordinary people listen to opinions, but they don't hand over the steering wheel of their lives to them. They understand that each individual observes the world through their own limitations, fears, and experiences. Therefore, not every opinion deserves the same weight. Some should be considered, others should simply be left behind. There is immense freedom when someone finally realizes they don't need anyone's permission to live according to their principles. And this freedom produces a profound transformation. Because when the influence of external opinions diminishes, space opens up to build something far more powerful. A presence so solid that it becomes increasingly difficult to be affected by the turbulence of the world around it. There comes a point in life when some people begin to notice a profound change happening within themselves. It's not something visible at first glance. It doesn't appear in the clothes they wear, the car they drive, or the job they hold. The transformation happens internally. It's when they stop reacting automatically to everything that happens around them. It's when they understand that not every provocation deserves a response, not every criticism deserves attention, and not every battle deserves participation. Gradually, they develop a stability that begins to influence all areas of their lives. Machiavelli understood that true power does not come from the ability to control others, but from the ability to control oneself. Those who master their own emotions become extremely difficult to manipulate. After all, manipulators depend on predictable reactions. They depend on insecurities, fears, impulses, and poorly managed emotional needs. When these points cease to exist or lose strength, external control weakens drastically. That's why some people seem to go through difficult situations with an almost disconcerting serenity, not because their lives are perfect, but because they have learned not to surrender their peace to any passing circumstance. They understand that true authority begins within one's own mind. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. It's built through small, repeated choices every day. Every time someone chooses not to respond to a pointless provocation, every time they decide not to seek unnecessary validation, every time they protect their energy from people who only drain emotional resources. Machiavelli knew that constant adaptability is an essential characteristic of those who wish to thrive in complex environments. Therefore, a strong individual doesn't become rigid. They become flexible without losing their principles. They learn to observe more and react less. They learn to listen more and explain less. They learn to act more and announce less. Over time, this posture produces a powerful effect. Their confidence ceases to depend on external circumstances. Their self-esteem stops fluctuating according to praise or criticism. Their tranquility ceases to be in the hands of others. And it is precisely at this point that many become, metaphorically, untouchable. Not because no one can attack or criticize them, but because these attempts no longer produce the same impact as before. However, there is one last element capable of definitively consolidating this transformation. A resource so valuable that when managed correctly, it completely redefines the quality of life and human relationships: attention. Ultimately, there is a resource more valuable than money, status, or influence. A resource that rich and poor, leaders and followers, young and old, receive in exactly the same quantity every day. That resource is attention, and yet few people learn to manage it intelligently. They protect their wallets, protect their homes, and protect their material possessions, but allow anyone unrestricted access to their mental focus. They spend hours following dramas that don't belong to them, discussions that lead nowhere, and opinions that add absolutely nothing to their lives. Machiavelli understood that every form of power depends on the correct management of resources. In a politics guided by reality, not by ideals, attention is a strategic resource. Where it is invested, energy grows. Where it is wasted, strength diminishes. Just observe two people with the same talent. One directs their focus towards goals, learning, and growth. The other distributes their attention among distractions, conflicts, and unproductive worries. After a few years, the results are usually radically different. This happens because attention acts like water irrigating the soil. What receives attention grows. What does not receive it weakens. This is why extraordinary individuals treat their attention like investors treat capital. They don't distribute it impulsively. They carefully assess where it will yield a return. Machiavelli knew that one's own loyal armies are more reliable than borrowed resources. Similarly, a disciplined mind produces far superior results than a mind constantly hijacked by external factors. When someone understands this, they begin to better select their conversations, their environments, their relationships, and even the content they consume daily. They start investing energy in knowledge, skills, health, purpose, and people who truly add value to their journey. They also learn that avoiding being hated doesn't mean pleasing everyone, but rather acting consciously without wasting resources trying to achieve universal approval. The individual who masters their attention discovers something most never realize. Freedom doesn't just come from financial independence or social influence. It comes from the ability to decide where their mind will go each day. And when this awareness becomes a habit, distractions lose their power, manipulations lose their effectiveness, and life begins to be driven by deliberate choices instead of automatic reactions. Those who reach this point not only protect their attention, but also begin to govern their own existence with the same strategic clarity that has transformed thinkers, leaders, and conquerors throughout history. Having reached this point, an inevitable question arises. How many people still have too much access to your mind? Stop for a few seconds and reflect honestly. How many times have you allowed an unimportant opinion to occupy your thoughts for hours? How many decisions have you failed to make for fear of others' judgment? How many times have you responded to provocations that didn't deserve even a second of your attention? The truth is that most people spend their entire lives struggling to control the world around them, but never learn to control what truly determines their destiny, their own focus. And that's precisely why so many lie tired, frustrated, and emotionally dependent on circumstances. Machiavelli understood that true power does not belong to those who react to everything. It belongs to those who carefully choose where to invest their energy. Because in the end, your attention is your life. What receives your attention receives your time. What receives your time shapes your results. And what shapes your results ultimately defines who you become. So the question remains, who is controlling your attention right now? You, or the people who constantly provoke, criticize, and drain your energy? Perhaps the biggest change in your life doesn't require you to do more. Perhaps it requires you to stop paying attention to what doesn't deserve it. Perhaps it requires fewer explanations, fewer justifications, and fewer impulsive reactions. Perhaps it only requires the courage to walk away from what steals your peace. From today onward, choose carefully who will have access to your mind. Choose carefully which opinions will be valued. Choose carefully which battles truly deserve your participation. And now I want to hear from you. What was the biggest lesson from this video? Is there someone in your life who no longer deserves your attention? And in what situation do you most need to apply strategic silence starting today? Write your answer in the comments. I read them all. If this content has made you see human relationships in a different way, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here you will continue learning about Machiavelli, power, strategy, human psychology, and the principles that allow you to develop a stronger, freer, and much less manipulable mind. See you in the next video.